Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rob. Welcome to the Kinetic Rugby League channel. It is good to be back. Now, in this video, I'm going to give you my 2026 Super League season preview. We're a few weeks away from the start of the Super League season, so it's about time for a preview. I'm going to go through all 14 Super League clubs. We're not at 12 anymore, folks. We're at 14. I'm going to go through the transfers out and the transfers in. I'll give you my thoughts on last season for each club and the upcoming season. I'll give you a transfer rating and a floor and ceiling for each team as well. So, let's get on with the first team for the season preview. Kicking things off, we have Super League newcomers, Bradford Bulls. Let's take a look at the players out and the players in. For the list of players out for Bradford, it includes Chris Hill, Michael Lawrence, Jordan Lilly, Kieran Gill, Nathan Mason, Bailey Liu, Tom Holmes, Tarrant Ott, Matty Gee, Jacob Bateman, Emmanuel Wayne, and James Meadows. For players in, it includes Andy Ackers, Rowan Milnes, Ethan Ryan, Jaden Nikarima, Aribe Doro, Logan Lewis, Will Gardner, Brandon Douglas, Connor Wynn, Caleb Akins, Ed Chamberlain, Dan Russell, Ryan Sutton, Joe Mellor, and Eason Masters. In terms of players out, there aren't any major losses here in my opinion. Hill and Lawrence would have been great for experience on the pitch, but they're at the end of their careers. But they have brought in a lot of players with good experience too. These are also players that are familiar with their new head coach, Kurt Haggerty. You can also watch my interview with Kurt Haggerty, by the way, which is on my channel. Go watch that after this. So there's now a core group of players that understand what the coach wants, and they bring a lot of Super League experience as well. I do think one of Bradford's biggest issues could be cohesion. Even though there are a lot of Salford players coming in, there are a lot of players that those guys will have to get used to as well. One area that I'm slightly concerned for Bradford is in the pack. I'm not worried about the experience or the quality that they bring, but the size of the pack. The new boys mean Bradford are bringing a pack with higher standards into Super League, but I don't know if they'll have enough presence through the middle to compete with most teams. It's a slight concern of mine. However, the spine does look good enough for Super League with Akins, Nikarima, Milnes, and Ackers. Akins doesn't have any Super League experience, but he has some NRL experience and plenty of championship games under his belt. Given this will be his first time in Super League, you'd imagine he's been ready for this kind of opportunity for a very long time. Hopefully he does well. I do think Nikarima is a quality player. Even when Salford had their squad issues last season, when he was in the side, you could see a massive difference in attacking quality. He can create chances from nothing as well, which is huge for a team that might struggle with structure, attacking structure early on. They've at least got a guy there that can create something by himself. With Milnes, he's a stable and steady option, but we'll see if he can take a big step in his career this season. When he joined Salford last year, he looked like a really confident, competent, and composed halfback. His kicking game caused some teams some problems as well. And then you had Ackers to that spine too. He can be a top 5 hooker in Super League. We'll see how he does this year. He wasn't able to play as much as he would have liked to last season at Leeds, but he's got a fresh start here, again, with a coach he's familiar with in Kurt Haggerty. I think Bradford will have some growing pains early on, but I think they could be an exciting attacking side given the quality of individuals they've brought in. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give Bradford a solid 8 out of 10. I would have liked a little bit more size, as mentioned. Again, good Super League experience and quality, but I think they need a bit more size. And it's, in terms of the list of players, it's not like the best that they can get. It's good, solid, fairly solid players all around. You know, it could have been an 8.5, could have been a 9, because there's a lot of players they brought in with a lot of experience, but I think it's just the quality could be a little bit higher. But I think an 8 out of 10 is very solid. In terms of a floor, I'm going to say as low as 13th. I can't see them finishing 14th. I don't think a squad that good would finish last. Compared to the other squads in the league as well, I can't see them being last place. In terms of a ceiling, might be a little bit high, but I'll go with as high as 6th. Just because there's a lot of questions, but a lot of Salford lads that are used to Kurt Haggerty, and they might be able to gel pretty quickly and produce some good performances from the jump. So, as a floor, 13th. As a ceiling for Bradford, I'll say just about 6th. Next up, we've got the mighty Castleford Tigers. Let's take a look at their transfers for this year. For players out, it includes George Griffin, Josh Sim, Jeremiah Simbikin, Sam Wood, Ines Senior, Muiz Mustafa, Josh Hodson, Will Tate, Liam Horn, and Tex Hoy. For players in, it includes Brock Greeken, Blake Taff, Michaeli Ravalawa, Semi Valame, Jordan Lane, Jack Ashworth, Renu Fatoni, Liam Hood, Darnell McIntosh, Tom Weaver, Aidan Doolan, and Jimmy Beckett. Now, I really like what Cass have done in the off-season. I think these signings are really, really smart. I don't always want to focus on team spines. I will be talking about them a lot, but for Cass, they have moved on from Hoy and Horn, but they brought in two players in particular that I think are really smart in Taff and Weaver. Young players with a little bit of NRL experience. They usually aren't starting, but now they get an opportunity to start week in, week out, and with that little bit of NRL experience, which as we know is a faster paced league, they can inject some of that pace into this Castleford side. That's exactly what Dejan Assi was last season as well, and towards the back end of the year, Assi was really starting to find some form, especially with his run game. Now with the spine of Taff, Assi, Weaver and Hood, I think they'll look a lot more threatening this season. They've also got some new additions to their forward pack, solid additions to Atoni, Lawler, Stimson, Greeken, Ashworth, Westerman and Singleton make Cass look a lot stronger up front. At the start of last season, I think we all pretty much acknowledged that they had the weakest side in Super League, and that included a really small forward pack. When they were able to bring in guys like Amon and Stimson, they had more presence through the middle, and you now add Atoni and Ashworth to that, their pack is now at another level. Now to finish off, the backline of Valame, Sini, McIntosh and Ravalawa looks really fast and exciting. They've also got Lewis Senior and Jason Garigari available when needed as well. Overall, Cass have built a good looking squad here, and with a new head coach in Ryan Carr, Cass look really fresh on paper, and I'm actually excited for them this season. I'm not expecting world beaters, but at the very least, I'm expecting a competent side that could really cause some upsets this season. So after all that, my transfer rating for Castleford is going to be a 9 out of 10. In terms of a floor, I'm going to go 11th. I think with the additions, I can't see them being in that bottom three. I think they'll be able to avoid it. They'll stay maybe not well away from it, but I don't think they'll be right near the bottom of the ladder. In terms of a ceiling, I'm going to go with 5th place. It depends on how the year goes. They might need a bit of fortune going their way, but I've got a good feeling that if everything just clicks for them, they could potentially get up to 5th place. I think at the very least, they could be within playoff contention. A lot of other teams have improved, but I think with the squad that they've got, just how everything looks, I'd say 5th is at a push possible, but I think they could maybe pose some questions for a playoff charge. Next up, we've got the Catalans Dragons. Let's take a look at their players out and the players in. For players out, the list includes Sam Tompkins, Theo Farge, Tavita Pangai Jr., Fuad Yaha, Arthur Romano, Paul Seguier, Elliot Whitehead, Tarek Sims, Tangai Zenon, Bailey Sirinen, Remus Smith, Luke Keary, Jordan Ezeria, and Ollie Partington. For players in, Catalans have brought in Toby Sexton, Solomon Fartape, Harvey Wilson, Josh Allen, Zach Lipwitz, Isaac Farsu Malawi, Charlie Staines, Josh Sim, Lewis Dodd, Ben Condon, I'm about to butcher this one, Phoenix Laulu Togahea, do correct me on that one if I'm wrong, Manese Koho, correct me on that one too, Jesus, and Cruz Leeming. Now in my opinion, Catalans were the most disappointing side of 2025. It's not even close for me. They were the most disappointing side. They have a really big forward pack on paper. Again this season. Last year, they didn't really dominate many games, and I thought they would. They've lost Pangai Jr., but they'll be hoping that Isaac Farsumalawi is a more, let's say, enthusiastic replacement. Can that pack do more damage this season, though? Possibly. They've added in some NRL talent too, with Charlie Staines joining the back line. He can also play fullback as well as the wing. He's a pacey player who's usually seemed reliable as well whenever I watched him in the NRL. Cruz Leeming, rotating with DaCosta at 9, looks really exciting for the Dragons up front at number 9. That frees up Garcia from hooker as well, so he can focus on being a prop/13 and just be that big unit through the middle with ball in hand and getting stuck in defensively. Now, Lewis Dodd is also an interesting pickup. It didn't go well for him at the Rabbitohs, but I think we all know he is a good enough player for Super League, and I think he will really appreciate being back in Super League, getting regular game time, and hopefully better support. But Toby Sexton has joined the Catalans Dragons, and that is a huge signing. I really think he can elevate Catalans to another level. For those that don't know him, he's been at the Canterbury Bulldogs for the last 2 seasons. In 2024, he wasn't starting for their first 10 games. They had a negative record and sat in around 10th, I believe. The next 10 games, Sexton played at 7. And the Bulldogs ended up, after those 10 games, with a positive record, and they'd moved up to 3rd or 4th, somewhere around there. In 2025, the Bulldogs were looking like a really strong, tough, quality side. And as soon as they decided to start moving things around, by bringing in Lachlan Galvin, the spine was unsettled. They were not the same team for the rest of the season. Sexton can manage games, take on general kicking games. He's got a short-range kicking game as well. He can run the ball too. He's not seen as a massive NRL star, but from what I've seen of him for the last 2 seasons in the NRL, you do not want to underestimate him. I think of all the additions here, he makes potentially the biggest difference of anyone this year in Super League. So for my transfer rating, I'm going to give them an 8.5. There's a lot of names here, but they've also lost a lot of names. Cruz Leeming is huge. That contributes to the 8.5. So does Isaac Fasu-Malawi, Charlie Staines, and Toby Sexton especially. This could have been a 9, maybe a 9.5 at a push if they hadn't have lost so many key names. But, you can't always, keep your best players and bring a bunch of good ones in too. But an 8.5 is really solid, really good business done, and I'm very excited about Toby Sexton. In terms of a floor, I'll go with 10th. That's mainly because of if any of the predictable attack remains from last season to this season. If Joel Tompkins is not the right man to lead the charge, they could be as low as 10th. I don't think it'll be that low, but that's the floor for me. I don't think they'll be any lower than that. In terms of a ceiling, because of the faith I have in the likes of Cruz Leeming and especially Toby Sexton, I think a potential ceiling is 3rd place. They'd really need things to click, and that'd be unlikely, but I think he could really drive things forward. So they should be within playoff contention, but as an absolute ceiling, I'll go with 3rd place. Next up, we've got the mighty Huddersfield Giants. Let's take a look at the players out and the players in. For players out, it includes Leroy Cudjoe, Jake Bibby, Jack Bibby, Aidan McGowan, Elliot Wallace, Oliver Wilson, and Ashton Golding. For players in, it includes Niall Evalds, Matthew Koza, Chris Patolo, Asher O'Donnell, and Ollie Russell. Now, as far as recruitment goes for Huddersfield this season, it's not great, but I do like their squad. I think it looks quite strong. They've got a spine consisting of Evalds, Lollahea, Clune, and Wolford. We know Evalds is a quality player, but he got injured in his first game for Huddersfield last season. Lollahea was having a great season last year before he got injured. Clune was also unavailable for a lot of 2025. He'll be really important this year. And then Wolford at 9, who I also think had an injury too, has looked decent when he's been on the field. Then you throw George Flanagan into the mix, who was probably the biggest positive of the Giants' 2025 campaign. Since he's such a young player, you can use him as you like. Start him, he'll be fine. Rest him if you don't want him to take as many hits at such a young age. You have a fresher player later down the line. Put him on the bench and inject it into the game wherever you like. Do what you want with him. As far as the spine goes, Huddersfield Giants are in a really good position. Now, moving on to the pack, it still looks quite strong. Oliver Wilson is a big miss up front, but Koza and Patolo are solid replacements, and they bring decent size too. I was impressed with some of the performances from Matty English as well at times throughout 2025, so hopefully he can take a big step up this year too. Joe Greenwood was a really solid ball runner as well, especially from inside the red zone. He caused a lot of problems for teams last year inside the red zone. Now, Tom Burgess is a bit of a question mark for me because at his best, when he's really trying, he can put people on their backside. But I don't think he offered enough of himself last year. Maybe he'll be a little bit more enthusiastic If Huddersfield are a better side this year, I don't know. We will have to see. But the backline for the Giants looks good on paper with Swift and Gagai potentially on the same side. We'll have to see about that one. But together, they could look really, really effective. On the other side, you could have Milne or Sutcliffe at centre with Halsall on the wing, which is still fine for me as well. One thing to keep in mind is that Huddersfield had a ridiculous number of injuries in 2025, and given the squad they've got in the forwards and backs, if they can stay relatively healthy, they could do a bit of damage this season. I think this is a playoff-capable squad on paper, but I'm not too sure yet if Luke Robinson is the guy to get them there. I hope he can, because he seems like a really nice guy, and I actually want him to do well. He's hopefully learnt a lot of lessons from last season as well. Now, defence was the Giants' biggest issue last year, aside, of course, from the injuries. Hopefully that's something they'll improve on in 2026. So the transfer rating I'm going to give Huddersfield is a 6 out of 10. I don't think it's that impressive, unfortunately. You know, they've not signed that many, but at least the squad is still good, as I mentioned. For a floor, I'm going to go with 11th. Again, I think they'll be a little bit like Castleford, where they could still be low, but I think they've got enough there to start pushing up. And for a ceiling, I'm going to go with 6th. I think this squad on paper should be in playoff contention. It's just about, can they gel? Can they get it firing? So yeah, floor is 11th, ceiling is 6th. Next up, we've got the black and white, Hull FC. Let's take a look at the players in and the players out for those guys. For players out, the list includes Kobe Wainhouse, Jordan Rapiner, Jordan Lane, Jack Ashworth, Jack Charles, Will Gardner, Zach Jebson, Owen Haldenby, Liam Watts, Ed Chamberlain, and Deneve Barnforth. For players in, the list includes Sam Lasone, Jake Arthur, Connor Bailey, Joe Batchelor, James Bell, Harvey Hill, Arthur Romano, and Joe Phillips. Now, Hull FC have a very strong-looking squad this season. Very strong. They've got a young but quality group of players in the back line with Barron, Litton and Martin. Hardacre is there as well, who was very important for Hull last year, but I'm sure they'd just like him to be settled in the one position. But at least they know he could play centre, full-back, stand-off, second row, or loose forward if needed. Now there's Martin, who had a fantastic year last year, we all know this, but I don't think enough people were talking about Harvey Barron. I think he's got a hell of a lot to offer in 2026. I think he had a great year in 25, but he's got even more to offer this year. I really like him, and I think he'll do really well. Now, Hull's spine looks great as well. Price will be at fullback with a full preseason this time too. I think he'll make a real solid push for England's #1 jersey for the World Cup later this year. Then you got Jake Arthur, who is similar to the young NRL players that I mentioned earlier for Castleford, but I'm not sure he's quite as far down the track in terms of development as those others. But then there's Caesar, who was a huge addition for Hull last year. He looked in control most of the time last year, and I think he can be just as good this season. His organisation and kicking was really important, but he actually had a bit of a run game too, which was surprising. But then Burrow, however you pronounce it, as the starting 9, could have himself a solid year, especially behind this forward pack, which includes SASA, Hill, Asiata, Lasone, Knight, Sell and Aiden. That's a brilliant forward pack. They already had an absolute tank in SASA. Now they can bring Lasone off the bench. That is insane. And on the edges, they've got Joe Batchelor and Jed Cartwright, both of which are experienced and quality players. Both of them can be real workhorses too. Now you look at a few other options available in Cust, who'll rotate as the hooker off the bench, but he can easily slot right back into the halves if needed. They've got James Bell, who can relieve Asiata at 13 later on in games, or do a shift in the back row. He's a real solid player off the bench. And then they have Briscoe and Romano, who can cover both centre and wing. And of course, the mighty Brad Fash, who can fill in at prop and loose forward when needed. Now, I do think Hull's defence needs to be a little bit more consistent this season. I think they've got enough attacking quality anyway to kind of make up for it sometimes, but the defence will need to be improved. I think they could really bully some teams through the middle of this season, and I think they should bully some teams, given that forward pack. This squad should absolutely be making the playoffs, in my opinion. My transfer rating for Hull FC is going to be an 8 out of 10. Very solid stuff from them. In terms of a floor, I'm going to go with 8th. Based on, what I just said, 8th might seem a bit ridiculous, but it's just because there could be a lot of teams in playoff contention that are quite close, and a lot of teams have gotten better. But in terms of a ceiling, I think they could be as high as third. I really think they could establish themselves as the third best team in the league. I think it's leaning more towards being third than it is eighth. This should be a playoff team. It should be. If they don't make playoffs, I do think it's a bit of a failure. But yeah, my floor is eighth. Ceiling for Hull FC is third. Now shifting from black and white to red and white, we've got Hull Kingston Rovers, the Robins. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, it includes Neil Chimambe, Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, Mickey McAlorum, Niall Evalds, Rowan Milnes, Kai Armstrong, AJ Wallace, Lenny Ellis, Danny Richardson, Felix Laulu Togahea, Uribe Doro, Leo Tennyson, and Kalepi Tanganoa. For players in, it includes Juma Sambu, Tom Amone, Declan Murphy, Kobe Wainhouse, Jack Charles, Jordan Desiree, Tom Whitehead, and Carl Lawton. Now, Hull KR already had a big pack. We all knew this, but they've added to it. Yes, they lost Warrior-Hargreaves, but they brought in Tom Amone. Yes, they lost Kalepi Tanganoa, but they brought in Carl Lawton. Yes, they lost Uribe Doro, but they brought in Jordan Desiree and Tom Whitehead, who can play prop or loose forward. They've done some really smart business here by making sure that they plug the gaps they need to maintain the standard of their squad. They've lost other pieces that can add value here and there in Evalds, Milnes and Richardson, but they've got two young lads in Declan Murphy and Jack Charles to cover those positions that they could fill. So they've been really clever here with their replacements, and they're looking for long-term options too in Murphy and Charles. Now, KR's forward pack was the cornerstone of that team. It was relied on every single week, and every week they played to an incredible standard. You could tell towards the back end of the season, the forwards looked a little bit knackered, but they still pinned teams back a lot. They moved the ball up the field, slowed down the ruck, and stayed fairly well disciplined from what I can remember as well. Now, because they're able to win the forward battle so often, they ended up in the red zone constantly, and their attack was unbelievably clean. They moved the ball with pace and accuracy. Their timing was immaculate. Their defence was elite as well. They shift across so quickly and shut down opportunities so easily. Now, since we're talking about the best team in 2025, there aren't many negatives, but if I have to kind of cover them, firstly, I would say the first two games of the season weren't great. They looked very dull and predictable, and later on in the season they had a slight dip in form with losses to Leeds, Wakefield and Leigh. Now, defensively, they did have some off days there and were second best in all areas in those games, but that was extremely rare. So for this season, I can't imagine their attack and defence would have gotten worse. I think they'll maintain their standards. I think the biggest challenge for KR this season is that I think most teams have improved their forward packs, and those forward battles might compound a little bit more. Therefore, rotation is key, and I think most teams will actually be better all round this season, so I think they'll be tested more in defence as well. Now, I imagine that they'll bully some teams up front. Plus, you look at the likes of Morg, who joined midway through last year. He actually made KR better when he joined. He's now got a full pre-season with this squad. Mikey Lewis took a massive jump from 2023 to 24 to 25. And if he takes another jump again in any way, whether it be with his run game, his kicking, or his defence, he's on for a Man of Steel season. Now, one player that I'm excited for this season is Jack Broadbent. I'm interested to see how his year goes. He's a player that I do think deserves a starting spot anywhere in Super League, but I assume Hiku and Gildart will stay at centre for now, which is completely fine. But Broadbent, as a young player, can fill in where needed, either at centre or at fullback if it opens up. Now, I do think KR will be tested more this season because of the reasons I mentioned. I don't think it'll be a case of them being worse. If they're worse in attack or defence, it'll be minimal. It won't be a case of them being much worse. I think it's a case of a lot of teams just getting better, which will make the task of getting back-to-back trebles a lot tougher. But given how good they were and how good they could still be, I think they could do it again. So for my Hull Kingston Rovers transfer rating, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10 as well. Very solid business from them too. In terms of a floor, it's going to be 4th place. Some people will think, well, they might be 2nd or 3rd. I think as the absolute lowest, it's 4th, just because, again, some of the decent teams from last year and even great teams from last year might still even get a bit better, and it could be a tougher task to maintain the same standard for Hull Kingston Rovers this season. So 4th is the absolute lowest, and the ceiling for me is 1st place. They could very easily pick up another trophy again. They could challenge for the treble. Once again, we will see. But yeah, floor is 4th, ceiling is first. Moving on to the Leeds Rhinos. Let's take a look at the players they've lost and the players they've brought in. With players out, the list includes Morgan Gannon, Sam Lasoni, Matt Frawley, Ethan Clark-Wood, Jack Smith, Andy Ackers, James Bentley, and Jack Sinfield. For players in, the list includes Jeremiah Matautia, Ethan O'Neill, Chris Hankinson, and Danny Levi. So Leeds have lost some key players in Gannon, Lasoni, and Ackers, and I think only one of them has been replaced properly, which is Levi in for Ackers. He's been in Super League before, he's a decent player, and I think he'll be a good partner for Jared O'Connor at 9 and 14. But with Leeds, the two areas that let them thrive last season was their forward pack, which was massive, and their intent to offload and get into the second phase. Now, they've got a lot of young forwards that continue to impress all throughout last year with Oledzki, Holroyd, Palacia, Jenkins. They even had Presley Cassell playing some games who didn't look out of place at all. You look at their backline too, it looks so experienced and competent on paper with Sevo, Newman, Handley, and Hall. That's a quality lineup there. Then you've got Watkins and Hankinson, they can fill in if needed. But Riley Lum is right there, and honestly, I think he's ready. He's still young, so there's no rush, but I do think he's ready to start for anyone in Super League. I'm also interested in seeing what kind of year Harry Newman has. He took a big step up in 2025, in my opinion, not just with ball in hand, but defensively, he was very reliable. That spine will be interesting as well. Lockie Miller at fullback last season absolutely killed it. Top 3 fullbacks last year, and that's playing it safe. He was huge for Leeds' second phases that I mentioned before. He was always available and looking to find gaps. Can Croft and Connor build on their partnership in 2026 with another pre-season together? It was talked about plenty of times that Leeds didn't really need an out-and-out halfback, but Jake Connor wasn't too far off being one. Now, when I was watching him for Huddersfield in 2024, he honestly looked like he couldn't kick a ball at times. It was really, really bad. But in 2025, he did a really good job with his kicking game, with distance and placement as well. He also didn't shy away from big moments, and he was a huge threat inside the red zone. Now, towards the back end of last season, for about 3 or 4 games, Leeds turned into something else. They were already a great side, but they just produced these godlike performances all of a sudden for a few weeks. But that was because of their fitness and defensive intent and intent to offload. Their attack was firing, but that was off the back of getting stuck in, and the defensive line was getting up so quickly and shutting teams down, including Hull KR in that stretch of games, which was a real shock at the time, but they just elevated to another level. And since Brad Arthur is always pushing for 80-minute performances, and he helped to get Leeds' fitness levels up, he can make Leeds even better this year, in my opinion. So to give them a transfer rating, I'm only going to give them a 5 out of 10. I'm not wildly impressed. They do still have a great squad, but in terms of transfers, it's only a 5 out of 10. It's quite underwhelming, unfortunately. In terms of a floor, I'm going to go with 5th place. I do think they should be a playoff team. There is no reason why they should be finishing outside of the playoffs, but as low as 5th because of other teams getting better. In terms of a ceiling, I think they could be 1st. If they find those godlike performances on a more consistent basis, if they take steps to improve in all areas, they weren't far off being the best, and for a few weeks they were the best in terms of performance. But I think as a ceiling, they could finish 1st. Next up, we've got the Leigh Leopards. So let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the ones they've gained. For players out, the list includes Darnell McIntosh, Ethan O'Neill, Brad Dwyer, Jack Derbyshire, and Alec Tuatavake. For players in, they've got Jacob Alec-Vinker, Oliver Pollock, Innes Senior, Adam Cook, and Liam Horn. Leigh have lost a few fairly important guys there, but overall, I don't think it's anything crazy. They've lost a few forwards, but they've brought in Jacob Alec-Vinker, who I've seen play for PNG the last few years in the Pacific Championships. He's always carried the ball well, he runs hard, and he gets stuck in. He's a fairly big guy, and I think he's a good pickup for Leigh. They have lost Dwyer, but I think Liam Horn is a good pickup in his place. Ipape and Horn together for PNG in the Pacific Championships worked really well. And the great thing with those two is that they can both rotate between hooker and loose forward so easily. I think Horn can do a little bit at 7 as well. I'll get on to Ipape now, who was incredible last year. And he's been learning some new roles too for the last few years. He's quick and destructive from 9. But he's becoming a more technical player when he's playing like a 7 as a first receiver. And of course, playing as a 13, he's important for transitions across the park. And let's not forget how strong he is in defence as well. Now, I'll get onto the rest of the spine in a second, but their forward pack did a great job last season. Not only do they have a lot of big guys that can move multiple players in the tackle, they're quite mobile as well. Defenders have to do a bit more work to get a hold of them and get them down and really slow down the ruck. The list includes Alec Vinker, Liu, Mulhern, Penne, Trout and Offengawi, who was a huge inclusion for Leigh midway through last season, by the way. Great signing midway through the year. They weren't the best forward pack, but they were well up there. I think they've got the firepower to compete with anyone this year. Now in the backs, Keenan Brand had a brilliant year. He was very reliable. We know how good Charnley is. He'll be fine this season if he's given more game time as well. But within his senior being there now, he could maybe slot in place of Charnley or Brand. We'll see. We'll see what happens with him. Now at centre, I think Hanley and Niu was the best centre pairing in 2025. It got to a point last season where I was saying that Hanley had to go in the Ashes squad for me and possibly starting at centre. But if he has another year like he did in 2025, he could easily be picked for the World Cup squad. Defensively, he was incredible. Offensively, inside the red zone, brilliant. Now, if we do end up seeing Tessie Niu play, he'll very likely be a tough player to stop again. I will just leave it at that. Now, I'll finish off with Leigh's spine. It is excellent. In my Leigh Leopards season preview last year, I mentioned David Armstrong could be a potential Man of Steel candidate. Didn't go too well in the end, but I really think he's got the tools to be a quality player. We didn't quite get to see that due to a few stints on the sidelines because of long-term injuries and persisting injuries when he did play on occasion. But if he can stay healthy and can hit the ground running this season, he could be insane. Now, O'Brien and Lamb have been building a lovely partnership for the last few years too. O'Brien always looks very composed and steady with ball in hand. He commands that right edge attack, and I think he can do another great job again. My only issue with O'Brien is sometimes he does get put on his backside when trying to defend against the back rowers. Then you've got Lachlan Lamb. So impressive last season. Ridiculous number of assists. He knows how to find the line himself as well. He plays at such a high level week in, week out. Leigh's spine is excellent. Then, of course, we've got Ben McNamara, who can fill in at 6, at 7, or at 9. And I quite like him too. Bit of versatility there is lovely. And let's not forget some of the brilliant performances from Bailey Hodgson. So reliable for most of the season. There were some games towards the back end of the year where, we'd see some errors from him, but he's got such a bright future in this league. Added Pape to that spine as well, and you're laughing. In back-to-back seasons, they've reached the playoff semi-final, and they've had great Challenge Cup runs over the past few years. I think it's time for them to take the next step. A Challenge Cup win would be amazing again, but I think they're about ready to start picking up some new trophies. Let's see what they can do. For a transfer rating for Leigh, I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10. I think it's alright. I think it is it's fine. In terms of a floor, same as Leeds, I'm going to go with 5th. Again, other teams just getting a little bit better. They could finish lower down in the playoffs, but I think should still be a playoff team. They've been very consistent over the last few years. I think we'll be able to retain that consistency this year as well. In terms of a ceiling, I'm also going to go with 1st place. If they're firing, if they can stay healthy, I think they could finish 1st. But I think in order to finish 1st, they need a lot of things going their way. But I think they've got the squad to do it. They just need to stay a little bit healthier this year, which sometimes it's out of their control. But floor is 5th. Ceiling is 1st. Next up, we've got St Helens, the Red V. Let's take a look at their transfer news, players out and players in. For players out, the list includes Morgan Knowles, Moses Mbai, T. Ritson, Kian McGann, John Bennison, Conrad Hurrell, Joe Batchelor, James Bell, Will Roberts, Deon Sambu, Johnny Vaughan, and Kieran Nolan. For players in, the list includes Shane Wright, Jacob Host, David Clemmer, Jacob Douglas, Joe Sharks, Jackson Hastings, and Nenny McDonald. They have lost some key pieces from last season, but they've brought in solid replacements. They lost Knowles, Batchelor and Bell from the forwards, but they brought in Host, Clemmer and Sharks. Really solid additions in place of those guys they've lost. Now, Saints' forward pack was massive last year, and it's still massive now. Wormsley and Lees will lead the way, and they'll still be able to bring guys like Passy and Delaney off the bench again. Delaney is another player that could end up in the England World Cup squad conversations, and Saints' pack, it wasn't even their best asset last season. It was one of them, but not quite the best. The best asset for Saints was their defence. It's usually very impressive from them, year on year. I'm assuming they'll be able to maintain their usual standards. But attack was one of the complaints last year. They still ended up being a pretty decent attacking side based on the points tally of 2025. I think that's mainly because against poor sides, they were able to dominate. And of course, the first game against Salford helped massively. But against tougher defences, they seemed less capable of opening up those defences compared to other teams. They created a good handful of long-range chances, but it felt like they really struggled inside the red zone. They couldn't deal with that shortened space. They could have countless play the balls in that area, and they could come away with nothing plenty of times. Now, I'm assuming their spine will be Welsby, Saylor, Hastings, and Clark this season. I know Lomax has the 7 jersey, but I think Hastings might be starting at 7. Since we saw Lomax coming off the bench a little bit last year, they might want to use him that way too. But for Hastings, he didn't really have the best of times in Australia since he moved back. We know what he can do in Super League. Can he get back to that level? I think there's a good chance he can, especially with their new head coach, who I'll get onto soon. Now, Saints do also have some rotational options in the spine, since they can swap Welsby and Saylor from 1 and 6. Whitby looks really promising last season as well, but of course there's no reason to rush him at the moment. But in the backs, Cal Felt could be right up there for total points or total tries come the end of the season. He can score tries, he's a great aerial threat, and his goal-kicking ability is huge for the extra points as well. Harry Robertson was under some pressure being such a young player, given a starting role at centre, but he did a brilliant job, and hopefully he continues to flourish. I do like seeing young guys do well in Super League. Dion Cross has been given the number 5 jersey for this season, but they've got Lewis Murphy there to fight for a spot. Jacob Douglas is now there as well, coming over from Wigan. And he did play a handful of games last season too, and did quite well. But for me, I think Owen Dagnall deserves that left wing spot. I understand he's young, but I kind of think he's ready. After seeing his performances on the left wing last season, I think he's kind of ready for that left wing spot. You then add Nenny McDonald in there too, where he can fill in at fullback, centre or wing. Saints have really good depth all over. Now finally, the new gaffer, Paul Rowley. After the slight struggles that Saints have gone through in the past few years, I think Rowley is a really, really good appointment. Veteran coach, loads of Super League experience, seems very level-headed, and after what he did with Salford alongside Kurt Haggerty over the past few years, he's exactly the kind of coach that Saints need to take them to another level and get back to potentially winning trophies, in my opinion. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give Saints an 8 out of 10. Again, very solid bit of business from them. They've done a pretty good job in the off-season. In terms of a floor, again, 5th. With other teams getting a little bit better, some teams might leapfrog them a bit, but this is a squad on paper that should be in the playoffs, should be absolutely in the playoffs, and you'd imagine on paper would be a little bit higher than 5th place as well. So therefore, in terms of a ceiling, I'm also going to go with 1st place. Maybe some growing pains early on, new head coach and a few new pieces, but really strong squad all around. If they can fix the attacking inconsistencies, remain a strong defensive side, and still be very strong through the middle, I think 1st place is possible. So floor is 5th, ceiling is 1st. Next up, we have another newcomer in Toulouse Olympique. Let's take a look at their transfers out and transfers in. For players out, the list only includes Greg Richards, Dominic Peyrou and Radian Robinson. For players in, it includes AJ Wallace, Brendan Hans, Luke Paulselli, Matthew Pons, Tyler Dupree, Henry O'Kane and Cesar Rouge. Just a quick heads up, I don't really watch the championship, so I won't be able to go as in-depth for Toulouse. Now, Bradford was easier to talk about because of the amount of Super League players they brought in, guys that I know about, but I will do my best with Toulouse. To me, there are no major losses here, which is a good start, although Peyrou would have been good for experience. However, there's a few decent additions here, with Tyler Dupree being one of them as a solid pickup for their forward pack. He's a tough player, very strong ball carrier, and I think he'll be huge for them this year. Then they've got Cesar Rouge. It's a good bit of business with him, actually. He can play at fullback or in the halves. I'm not sure if he starts for Toulouse, but he has looked capable enough of starting in Super League, but he's at least good enough as a rotational player if they need him. Brendan Hans, I know a little bit about from some game time in the NRL, I believe. He was a decent pickup too. He joined the club midway through 2025, played 8 games, and he's getting a head start going into this year, which is good for him. Now, given that the squad isn't that much different to their 2025 Championship campaign, I can at least look at last year's results as a slight guide. Now, they finished second in the league, 2 points behind York. They won 19 games and lost 5. They had the third best attack behind York and Bradford, and they had the second best defence behind York again. Now, during the season, they played Bradford 3 times, winning all 3. They also played York 3 times, beating them twice. One of those wins being against them in the grand final. Now, there are 2 players that I do know something about. They are Paul Ulberg and Ruben Rennie. I saw both of them for Cook Islands in the Pacific Championships last year. Now, Ulberg's carries out of the backfield were brilliant. He was so effective carrying the ball when the Cookies were nearly getting pinned back. He got them out of trouble quite a bit, and that could be very important for Toulouse in Super League this year. And with Rennie, he was a real handful. Inside the red zone, he always looked to try and find the try line, and a few times he succeeded and came very close a lot of the time as well, because he's a strong runner, he's fairly elusive, and he's a handful. He's real difficult to get a hold of. Now, I don't know much about the whole squad, but they've been in the Championship Grand Final for 3 seasons in a row, which doesn't happen if you haven't got a good and consistent team or setup at the club, which is a good sign. This will be a step up for them this year in Super League. I think we'll see them go through struggles, especially early on, but over time, like London Broncos in 2024 and Salford Red Devils in 2025, in time, things will get a little bit easier and they'll learn to adapt on the job. As long as they can get the basics right, complete their sets, defend with discipline, that will go a long way for Toulouse. So for a transfer rating, I'm going to give them a 6.5 out of 10. There's a few good additions there, of course, with Brennan Hans, but that was last year. Dupree, O'Kane, Rouge, Wallace, there's some decent additions, and they haven't lost anyone ridiculous. I think it could have been lower than a 6.5, but because they haven't really lost anyone major, I think 6.5 is reasonable. In terms of a floor, I'm going to go with 14th. I think they could finish last. I'm not sure their squad is really strong enough to do too much damage this year. For a ceiling, I'm going to give them 9th. Maybe they start to click. Maybe as the year goes on, they make improvements. Maybe they're just ready to go from the jump. I can't see them pushing for playoffs. Maybe from 9th place, like points-wise, they're not that far off. But I think at the absolute best, it's going to be 9th place. Next up, we have Darryl Powell's Wakefield Trinity. Let's take a look at their signings out and the signings in. For players out, the list includes Josh Griffin, Jack Croft, Liam Hood, Matthew Cozza, Matty Russell, Renu Fatoni, Miles Lawford and Ollie Russell. For players in, the list includes Neil Chimambe, Tyson Smoothie, Jazz Tavanga, Trey Lalacio, Jordan Williams, Kian McGann, Will Tate and Jack Sinfield. Now, they've lost some very important players there, but they are another side that has brought in some like-for-like players to help out. Matty Russell out, Neil Chimambe in, Ollie Russell out, Jack Sinfield in, Liam Hood out, Tyson Smoothie in. Now, they have also lost Griffin, Cozza and Atoni, who were really important for their pack last year, but I think they've still got enough quality left. And Jazz Tavanga is a very important signing, but I'll get onto him later on. Now, Wakey have been able to keep the same spine, which is important for their growth this year. Everyone has clarity going into this season. They can go into this season even stronger. Max Jowett was a really exciting and valuable player for Wakey last year. Unfortunately, he had some injuries throughout the season, but when he did play, he was excellent. Wakey have Truman and Lino in the halves together again, and I kind of like Truman. He's had a lot of injury problems over the past few years, but I really hope he can stay settled at Wakey and stay healthy, because I think he can be a very productive halfback. But Wakey had Mason Lino leading the kicking game last year, which Lino was actually able to improve on as the season went on last season. Now at hooker, I've not seen that much of Tyson Smoothie because he's not usually a starter in the NRL, at least recently anyway. But he's got a good handful of NRL experience. I think he'll be completely fine over here, but I'm really excited about Harvey Smith. He looks like a real talent. I think in a few years' time, he could be pushing for a spot in the England squad. Maybe not this year, could still be exciting, but I think there could be a place for him soon. Now that Wakefield forward pack though, it was quite impressive last year. McMeekan was a tank all season. Nicotimo, Staunton and Pitts put in some solid shifts too, and guys like Vanganar, Hamanueli and especially Fartilli were devastating coming off the bench. Fartilli found another gear halfway through 2025. Let's see what he can do in 2026. But I'm going to finish off with Jastavanga. Now, he's by no means an NRL star, but given the kind of player he is, I think he's a very good fit for most teams. First of all, he can play at 9 if needed, but he's a hybrid at loose forward. He can carry the ball fairly well, and he's technically pretty good too, whether he's needed in attacking structure to move the ball quickly and cleanly, or to deliver a grubber kick from inside the 10. He's willing to put in a shift through the middle as well. Wakey could start him at 13, or bring him off the bench. I think what Jastavanga does really well is read the game, read what his team needs in the game at a given time, and adjust accordingly. And he can have an actual effect on the game. Again, he's not a star, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see him producing a fair few highlights this season. I think he's a real good fit for Wakey and what they need trying to build on their journey in Super League. Overall, Wakey have a really strong squad. There's a good mix of youth, experience, pace and size. They just need a little bit more consistency on both sides of the ball throughout the season, and they could see themselves in the playoffs once again. For transfer rating, I'm going to give them a decent 7 out of 10. I think it was completely fine. They've lost some big names, but they've brought in some decent replacements, so good for them. In terms of a floor, I'm going to say 8th. I think they should be competing for playoffs. I don't think they'd finish any lower than 8th. They should be fine competing there again, given the quality of the squad, the size in the pack, the mobility, the quality in the backs. I think there's a decent squad here that should be good for a playoff charge again, but no lower than 8th. In terms of a ceiling, I'm going to go with 4th. It's a quality squad, but I don't know if it's good enough to really break into the top 4, top 3. But I think if everything goes their way, if they can really click and make improvements from last year, and again be more consistent on both sides of the ball, I think 4th is a possibility. I think maybe next year, if they're not quite reaching that top 3, they could maybe go for some stronger options in the transfer market for next year. But floor is 8th, which isn't too bad, but the ceiling, I think, for them is 4th. Next up, we have the Warrington Wolves, the Primrose and Blue Wire, in their 150th season as a club. Let's take a look at their transfers for this year. For players out, they've lost Paul Vaughan, Stephen Ratchford, Lachlan Fitzgibbon, Dan Russell, Tom Whitehead, Nolan Tapia, Lucas Green, Zach Barsley-Rowe, Alfie Johnson, Roderick Ty, Dan Okoro and Matt Dufty. For players in, the list includes Toa Sipley, Liam Byrne, Albert Hopawate, James Bentley, Josh Smith, Sam Stone and Kalepi Tanganoa. Now, if you're new to the channel, just to give you a quick heads up, I am a Warrington Wolves fan. Just to let you know, you've been warned. Now, I do think Warrington have done some pretty good business here. One major problem Wire had last year was the size of the pack. It was way too small. When they did start Vaughan, Musgrove and Harrison together, they could compete, but we kind of lost Musgrove halfway through the year. Harrison picked up an injury later on in the season. And I do think Warrington ended up with the weakest pack in the league by the end of the year. But with the new additions, it's less of a concern. Byrne, for one, is a very gritty, hard-working ball carrier and defender. He might give away a fair few penalties, which I'm not a fan of, but he brings physicality to Wire's pack, as does Sipley. When I've seen him come off the bench for Manly, he runs really hard. He's always trying to be erratic in the tackle as well, to make it harder to bring him down, or so he can force an offload. Tanganoa was also a quality player for Hull KR last season, but he brings really powerful carries to Warrington's left edge. So the pack looks much better this season, but as for the backs, starting with the spine, Kai Taylor-Ray is a very exciting prospect. He is young, and it could take some time for him to feel fully comfortable, but he's got a pre-season under his belt as a number 1, getting much needed reps with the likes of Ewan Irwin, who looks like a real star of the future, and George Williams. Now, Williams has been given a lot of stick over the past few years, last season especially, but I always see him giving 100% every week. He's always trying to unlock defences, and he's a very strong defensive player too, which I think a lot of people forget. He's very, very strong defensively. But then Mark Sneed gets a pre-season with this spine as well. He joined sort of midway through last season. It was fairly early, but it was still midway through. Last season, he gave Warrington the best kicking game they've had for a very long time. He can also build those combinations with Williams and Taylor-Ray. Then Wire have Danny Walker at 9. I think he's an exceptional player who can break solid defensive lines, and he offers a kicking game too. and also a threat of 40-20s, which is always solid. I do think the additions of Albert Hopewarte and Josh Smith are huge for Warrington in the backs. Hopewarte has had some injury problems too, but when I've seen him in the NRL, he looks quick and he looks skillful. Looks like a decent player. Josh Smith is new to me, but he was in the 2025 Queensland Cup Team of the Year, so that is hopefully something. But Warrington also have a lot of youth working their way through. Holroyd, Irwin, Hayes, Thomas, Lindup, Wood, Jake Thewlis, Gardner, McKinney and Hartill. The fact all of those guys can be trusted to do a job is very positive for Warrington's future. Now, I will say, as much as Warrington had some poor performances last season, the pack was dominated a lot, the attack looked still unpredictable a lot, and the defence had a lot of major lapses, Warrington had a lot of injuries. A lot. Dufty was out at one point. Ty was out for most of the season. Same with Ashton. Sneed missed games, as did Williams, as did Walker. Same with Harrison, Curry, Holroyd, and I think there's at least one or two others, maybe 3 or 4 that I'm forgetting. This is not an excuse, just to be clear, for some of those performances, because they were poor. But it's hard to get much going, offensively at least, with so many key players missing throughout the year and a lot of young players having to fill in. Now, Steve McNamara also joins the club's coaching staff for this season. On paper, that's a great appointment. He and Burgess know each other. He can help guide Burgess as a coach, who's already had quite varied experiences in just 2 seasons as a head coach. Now, I think Warrington have done a very good job with signings. The squad looks bigger, faster, and better overall this year. The presence in the middle is going to be very important this season, and the defence needs toughening up. For my Warrington Wolves transfer rating, I'm going to give them an 8.5 out of 10. I think they've done some really good business, really smart. They've brought in the kinds of players that they've needed for a little while actually as well. Really solid additions. In terms of a floor, it's quite a wide range here. In terms of a floor, I've gone with 8th, because they might still have those lingering issues where I think against some teams the forward packs are still a little bit bigger, so that might be an issue, but at least they can offer more physicality. And there's maybe still some defensive lapses and some attacking predictability here and there. That might still remain, but they should be playoff contenders given the quality of the squad. In terms of a ceiling, I think 3rd is probably a realistic ceiling, just because of the fact that even in 2024, best attack and defensive team, I believe, in the league in terms of points difference. And also even last year when Warrington weren't a good side, they were still able to get to a Challenge Cup final. I think there will be some major improvements, and given the squad on paper, it is a very strong squad with a very good spine on paper. Of course, it's not played on paper, but I think 3rd is a realistic ceiling for Warrington. Moving over to the Wigan Warriors, the Cherry and Whites. Let's take a look at their transfers out and transfers in. For players out, the list includes Christian Wade, Liam Byrne, Harvey Hill, Tyler Dupree, Jacob Douglas and Cruz Leeming. For players in, it includes Deon Sambu, Johnny Vaughan, Oliver Wilson, Finn McMillan and Ollie Partington. Now, Wigan have brought in some decent players, but I'm not sure it's enough compared to what they've lost. Luckily, they've got a very strong squad anyway. Now, do they have the best spine in Super League? First of all, you would probably have to say yes. Field is a ridiculous player with ball in hand, and defensively he's really reliable as well. His pace certainly helps. Then there's Bevan French, who I believe is the best player in the league. That's my opinion. He's an absolute freak of nature at times. Then you got Harry Smith, still there at 7. Very good kicking game, all-round reliable, and very solid halfback. Then you have Brad O'Neill at hooker, who is a quality and consistent player most of the time. So in terms of creating chances, I don't think Wigan will have much trouble in that department. Now, in the pack, they've got so many options as well. Now, I will say, midway through last year, Wigan took a bit of a dip. And during that period, I saw a lot of their forwards phoning it in, especially when defending on their own try line. They conceded some easy tries from lazy defensive work from the middles, and they looked more vulnerable in the midfield battle because of their efforts. Now, during this time, Thompson was missing for a few games, but when he came back in, they all stepped it up again. I think he, in particular, was fantastic, as he usually is. There's then Havard, Walters, Mago, Essay is now back as well, and Wilson, on top of Thompson. There should be more than enough there in the forward pack to win most of the forward battles this year, and they'll likely bully and dominate some teams this season. Now, one major threat of Wigan's for a few seasons now has been their left edge attack, which normally consists of Smith combining with Nsemba, who could actually do with a big season this year, an improved season. And then there's Wardle and Marshall. Wardle is seen as the best centre in the league to many people, and Marshall has been at least one of the best wingers in the league for a few years now. Their pace, timing, and execution down that left side is often perfect. But down the right side, last season they started to use that edge a little bit more. Bevan French can create opportunities by himself anyway, but a partnership now of Kieran and Eckersley could be very exciting. Kieran can be solid in defence first of all, but in attacking positions, he usually looks calm and composed and makes good decisions. If he gets the ball to Eckersley in a bit of space, he is likely gone. Eckersley is rapid. I do think Miskey has been hard done by here if he's no longer starting, but if and when he's needed, I think he's bound to put in a quality shift on the wing. But my only issue with Eckersley is that he can be caught out of position in defence sometimes. He's got the pace to make up for it sometimes, but against some wingers it won't be enough. Now, I'm not sure how much we'll see the likes of, say, Hurst, Vaughan and Sambu, but Wigan have some decent young talent for either edge available if they need to rotate players. We'll see Forber getting more game time since Leeming has gone to Catalans, but I wonder how much we'll see of Farman. He did a great job last season when he got game time. Now, overall, Wigan will likely be title contenders again. They're another team that could be looking for a treble season. And they did have some injuries in the spine last year, which shook things up a bit, which made life tough for them. But if they stay relatively healthy, they could pick up some silverware this season. So to give Wigan Warriors a transfer rating, I'm only going to give them a 5.5 out of 10. I don't think they've been that exciting with transfers. There's good stuff here, but in terms of the guys they've lost and the guys they've brought in, it's not that exciting. It's not that meaningful. The one thing that is a decent positive, though, is the fact that, yes, they've lost Cruz Leeming for a year, which I don't think is a good call anyway to bring in Ollie Partington. At least long-term, Leeming does come back and Partington also stays for next year. So that's good long-term, but for this year, it's only a 5.5. In terms of a floor, same as Hull Kingston Rovers, 4th place, just with other great teams from last year getting a little bit better. And maybe the loss of Leeming. Byrne was maybe more influential. Dupree possibly as well. We will see what kind of effect they have through the middle. I think they'll still be fine as well. But the ceiling for them is, of course, 1st place. With the best spine in Super League, I think they'll be fine offensively. They'll be fine defensively as well. They normally are. Through the middle, they should be okay. They normally execute really well on both sides of the ball. Ceiling is fairly easily 1st and could pick up some trophies this year as well. Finally, we have York Knights, another newcomer for this season. Let's take a look at their transfers out and transfers in for 2026. For players out, the list includes Connor Bailey, Joe Brown, Jacob Gannon, James Farrar, Jack Potter, Akuma Tatai, Connor Fitzsimmons and Joe Law. For players in, the list includes Paul Vaughan, Josh Griffin, Jordan Lips, Sam Wood, Justin Sangare, John Bennison, Jack Smith, Danny Richardson, Matty Foster, Ryan Jackson, Deneve Barnforth, John Sasanga, Nikhil Williams and Xavier Vea. Now, York actually have a very big squad going into this season, which you'd hope is a good thing. It gives them plenty of options going forwards. It's huge for rotation in case of injuries, and if some guys need a bit of a rest given the increase in intensity. Now, again, I don't watch the Championship, but as far as Super League standards go, they don't have any major losses in terms of the names I mentioned. They've brought in a good amount of quality, experienced players, though, which is fantastic for them. Firstly, being able to have a potential front row of Paul Vaughan and Justin Sankare is quality. That is a quality front row right there. Then you include Paul McShane as well, who's a former Man of Steel player. That's a solid looking front row for York for their first year in Super League. Now, I don't really know the rest of the spine, which based on squad numbers would be Matafa, Hingaro and Harris. Probably butchered those names there, the first two at least. I don't know a thing about them. The only player I do know about is Danny Richardson. It's been a tough few years for him. He's not been able to settle anywhere, but if they needed him to do a job, I think he could do a pretty solid one. Now, Sam Wood and Josh Griffin add Super League experience to York's edges as well, But looking at York the same way I did for Toulouse, they finished first in the league with 20 wins and only 4 losses. They had the best attack by a decent margin as well, and they had the best defence. They did lose the grand final against Toulouse, but had a great season overall with Ben Jones-Bishop as the league's top try scorer and Liam Harris as the league's top point scorer. Now, they're another team that's going to experience growing pains, but just like I said for Toulouse, like with London in 2024 and Salford Red Devils in 2025, in time, things will get a little bit easier and they'll learn to adapt on the job. As long as they get the basics right, complete their sets and defend with discipline, that will go a long way for York. For a transfer rating for York, I'm going to give them an 8.5 out of 10. Really solid additions here, especially with Paul Vaughan, Josh Griffin, Sam Wood and Justin Sangare. Few other decent pieces scattered around there. They've got a really bulky squad now, which is good for them. In terms of a floor, I'll go with 14th. I think there's the potential they finish last just because of the strength of the spine. I don't know if it's going to be that good competing in Super League, but I think the ceiling for them is as high as 9th, because I think maybe with the attacking quality and defensive quality they actually had last year in the Championship, some of it might be able to translate fairly well into Super League. And with the additions of the guys that I mentioned specifically a second ago, I think they could elevate them to a decent 9th, and that would be a good place to build from in future and maybe get some more exciting, more experienced pieces in the spine later down the track. But yeah, floor is 14th, ceiling is 9th. So ladies and gentlemen, there you have my Super League 2026 season preview. If you guys have your own thoughts on any team, you disagree with me, you have a different rating, feel free to let me know, give me your opinions. In terms of what's going to happen for this season, I've shifted memberships from YouTube to Patreon, so I can offer more perks over there. When we get a little bit closer to the start of the season, I'm going to try and sort out the predictions and fantasy leagues. If I'm unable to get those organised properly, I'm just going to try and do it through the comment section, so you can submit directly through the comments and it'll just be free entry if I can't get those sorted through Patreon. But there'll be some behind the scenes videos over there, and once I get 10 active members, I'll be doing monthly giveaways. So it's kind of a lottery system. You know, whatever membership you have, you'll get more entries into that prize draw. So yeah, and there's also some more charity stuff coming soon. I did an MND fundraiser last year, and I'm sort of already planning ahead for another one this year with a few clubs getting in touch, which is very kind of them. But yeah, feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed. Leave a like as well. It does help to get the video out there to more people. And again, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But it is good to be back. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.